Have you ever caught yourself thinking, if only I had that job, that relationship, that amount of money, then I'd finally be happy? It's a feeling so many of us know well. We chase after things, convinced that happiness lies just beyond our reach, always one step away. But what if I told you that the Stoics, those ancient philosophers known for their unshakable calm, believed something radically different? They argued that you already have everything you need to be happy right here, right now. No promotions, no possessions, no external validation required. Marcus Aurelius, the great Stoic emperor, put it simply, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Think about that for a moment. What if happiness isn't about what you acquire, but how you see what you already have? This isn't just some abstract idea. It's a truth that's been tested across centuries. The Stoics didn't just preach this, they lived it. They faced exile, illness, even death with a serenity that seems almost superhuman to us today. How? Because they understood that happiness isn't dictated by circumstance. It's built on something far more dependable, your own perception, your values, your ability to focus on what you can control. Imagine waking up tomorrow and realizing that the frustration you feel when things don't go your way, the disappointment, the envy, the endless wanting, none of it has to define you. That's the power Stoicism offers. It's not about suppressing emotions or pretending life is perfect. It's about recognizing that the tools for contentment are already in your hands. So what does that look like in practice? In this video, we're going to explore the core Stoic principles that turn this idea into a way of life. We'll talk about control, how to distinguish between what's in your power and what isn't. We'll dive into perception, the art of reframing challenges as opportunities, and most importantly, we'll examine virtue, the Stoic belief that true happiness comes from living with integrity, courage, and wisdom. These aren't just philosophical concepts, they're practical tools you can use today to shift your perspective and find peace in the midst of chaos. By the end, you might just realize that the happiness you've been searching for has been within you all along. Ready to see how? Let's begin. Why do we so often tie our happiness to things we can't control? The perfect job, the right partner, the number of likes on a post. The Stoics saw this chase for what it really is, an illusion. Epictetus, a former slave turned philosopher, put it bluntly, some things are within our power while others are not. Our opinions, our actions, our values, those belong to us. But the opinions of others, the outcomes of our efforts, even the comforts of our bodies, those are never fully ours to command. And yet, we pour our energy into chasing them, believing they hold the key to our happiness. Think about social media for a moment. How many times have you posted something and then anxiously checked for reactions, letting your mood rise or fall with each notification? That's the trap. The Stoics would argue that by handing your sense of worth over to strangers' thumbs, you're giving away your power. The validation you crave isn't just fleeting, it's an illusion of control. The same goes for material things. That car, that house, that next purchase, they might bring temporary pleasure, but they can't create lasting contentment. Because here's the truth, happiness built on externals is like building a house on sand. It shifts with every change in circumstance. So here's a challenge. Pause for a second and ask yourself, what's one thing you're convinced you need to be happy? Now imagine it's gone tomorrow. Would you still be able to find peace? The Stoics weren't saying we shouldn't enjoy good things, only that we shouldn't chain our well-being to them. When you start to see the difference between what's truly yours and what isn't, something shifts. You stop waiting for life to hand you happiness and realize you've been holding it all along. Seneca once wrote, We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Think about that. The same event, a missed promotion, a harsh comment, a sudden change of plans, can crush one person while barely affecting another. Why? Because happiness isn't dictated by what happens to us, but by how we choose to see it. The Stoics called this the discipline of perception, the ability to strip away the judgments we layer onto events and see them for what they truly are. A rainy day isn't bad unless you decide it ruins your plans. A traffic jam isn't frustrating unless you label it that way. The power lies in your interpretation. Take two people stuck in the same airport delay. One fumes, scrolling angrily through flight updates, convinced the universe is against them. The other pulls out a book they've been meaning to read, grateful for unexpected quiet time. The delay hasn't changed, but their experiences couldn't be more different. This is the heart of Stoic wisdom. External events are neutral. It's our stories about them that create joy or misery. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, reminding himself, "Choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been." Here's how to put this into practice. Grab a notebook and think of a recent challenge, maybe a work conflict or a personal disappointment. Now write down 3 ways you could reframe it. For example, "My project failed" becomes, "I learned what doesn't work and that's valuable." Or, "They criticized me" shifts to, "Their feedback might help me grow." This isn't about pretending things are perfect. It's about recognizing that every situation holds multiple truths, and you get to choose which one guides you. The more you practice this, the more you'll notice something extraordinary, the less life happens to you, and the more you happen to life. The Stoics believed something radical, that virtue, not wealth, fame, or comfort, was the only true good. And by virtue, they didn't mean some vague moral ideal. They meant 4 concrete qualities: wisdom to see the world clearly, courage to face adversity head-on, justice to treat others with fairness, and temperance to master your desires. Marcus Aurelius put it this way: "Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be one." That's the heart of it. Virtue isn't about appearing noble to others. It's about aligning your actions with nature, your own rational, compassionate nature. Picture this: you're stuck in a long line at the grocery store, running late, and the cashier is moving painfully slow. Most of us would feel irritation bubbling up. But what if, instead of focusing on the delay, you chose to practice patience, a form of temperance, or imagine you're passed over for a promotion you deserved? Rather than stewing in resentment, what if you responded with justice, recognizing that fairness isn't always guaranteed, but your integrity is yours to keep? These small moments are where Stoic virtue comes alive. It's not about grand gestures, it's the daily choice to act with purpose, regardless of outcomes. Here's the profound shift: when you make virtue the goal, failure disappears. Why? Because even if your project flops or your plans unravel, you still succeed if you acted with courage and wisdom. External results might be out of your hands, but your character isn't. That's why the Stoics called virtue the highest good. It's the one thing that can't be taken from you. Think of Socrates, condemned to death yet utterly at peace, or Cato, who chose principle over power even when it cost him everything. Their happiness didn't depend on circumstances. It flowed from their unwavering commitment to living rightly. So ask yourself, how would today feel different if you measured success not by what you achieved, but by how you showed up? If a stranger observed your actions without knowing your goals, would they see wisdom in your choices? Courage in your challenges, justice in your words, that's the Stoic litmus test. Because here's the secret: inner fulfillment doesn't come from crossing finish lines. It comes from knowing you ran the race with honor, and that's something no one can ever take away. Epictetus drew a line in the sand that changed everything. Some things are up to us and some are not. This simple distinction, the dichotomy of control, is the cornerstone of Stoic peace. Picture yourself in bumper-to-bumper traffic, late for an important meeting. Your knuckles whiten on the steering wheel, your pulse races with every glance at the clock. The Stoics would ask, does raging at the red lights move you forward? Does cursing the construction zone clear the road? Of course not. The traffic is entirely outside your control, but your breath, your focus, whether you use this time to listen to an audiobook or fume in frustration, that's your domain. This isn't passive resignation, it's strategic focus. Ancient Stoics compared life to a dog tied to a cart. It can trot willingly or be dragged, but the cart moves either way. Resistance only creates suffering. Modern psychology echoes this with the concept of the circle of influence, the idea that wasting energy on unchangeable circumstances drains the vigor needed for meaningful action. When you stop fighting the traffic and start choosing your response, something remarkable happens. The frustration that once consumed you becomes fuel for growth. Try this today. Carry a small notebook and divide the page into 2 columns, what I control and what I don't. Each time stress arises, pause and categorize it. Your coworker's rude comment, column 2. Your decision to respond with kindness or walk away, column 1. Over time, you'll notice a pattern. The things that truly shape your well-being almost always land in the first column. The noise of the world fades and your power comes into sharp focus. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily on the battlefield, writing, "You have control over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and strength will follow. That strength isn't about brute force, it's the quiet confidence of knowing where your agency begins and ends. The next time life throws a traffic jam in your path, remember, the brake lights ahead aren't yours to command, but the music you play, the gratitude you cultivate for the extra time alone, the deep breath that keeps you centered, those are yours to choose. And in that choice lies freedom. There's a phrase the Stoics use that might sound counterintuitive at first. Amor Fati, love your fate. Not just tolerate it, not just endure it, but love it. This isn't about blind optimism or pretending everything is perfect. It's about recognizing that every twist, every obstacle, even every heartbreak carries a hidden gift if you're willing to look for it. Centuries later, Friedrich Nietzsche would echo this Stoic idea with his own fierce twist. My formula for greatness in a human being is amor fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity. Think about the weight of that, not just accepting your life as it is, but embracing it so fully that you wouldn't rewrite a single chapter. Consider 2 people facing the same setback, a job loss. One spends months railing against the injustice, replaying every detail of what went wrong, drowning in if only scenarios. The other, practicing amor fati, asks, what does this make possible? Maybe it's the nudge to finally start that business they'd been dreaming about. Maybe it's the chance to reconnect with family or rediscover a forgotten passion. The event itself hasn't changed, but one perspective keeps them stuck in the past, while the other opens doors they might never have noticed otherwise. This isn't just philosophy, it's neuroscience. When we resist reality, our brains flood with stress hormones, trapping us in a cycle of frustration. But acceptance, true acceptance, activates the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for creative problem solving. The Stoics knew this intuitively. Epictetus, born into slavery, didn't waste energy wishing for a different life. Instead, he asked, how can I use this? His answer transformed him into one of history's most revered teachers. So here's a challenge. Think of one thing you've been resisting: a health issue, a financial strain, a relationship that didn't turn out as you'd hoped. Now imagine, just for a moment, embracing it entirely, not as a burden but as a teacher. What might it be trying to show you? Maybe that setback taught you resilience. That heartbreak revealed your capacity to love deeply. That failure sharpened your clarity. Amor Fati doesn't erase pain, but it alchemizes it. The wound becomes wisdom. The obstacle becomes the path, and suddenly you're not fighting life anymore, you're dancing with it. What if the key to appreciating what you have isn't gaining more, but imagining losing it? That's the paradox at the heart of negative visualization, a Stoic practice Seneca called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. It sounds counterintuitive, even unsettling at first. Why would anyone willingly dwell on loss? But here's the twist. By temporarily stripping away the comforts we take for granted, we see them with fresh eyes. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius, "He robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand." In other words, when we mentally rehearse adversity, we disarm its sting and uncover gratitude we didn't know we had. Try this. Close your eyes and picture your phone slipping from your pocket into a storm drain. Gone. No contacts, no photos, no endless scrolling. For a moment, feel that loss, the inconvenience, the disconnection. Now open your eyes. Notice how your fingers instinctively tighten around it. That's negative visualization in action. The Stoics weren't advocating pessimism. They were teaching us to see. When we imagine life without running water, we pause mid-shower to appreciate the warmth. When we visualize losing a loved one's laughter, we listen more closely to it today. The practice isn't about fear. It's about waking up to the fragile, fleeting beauty of ordinary moments. Seneca took this further. He urged his students to periodically live as if their worst fears had already happened. Wear simpler clothes, skip a meal, walk instead of riding. These weren't acts of self-denial, but exercises in emotional resilience. By voluntarily stepping into discomfort, we prove to ourselves that joy isn't tethered to external conditions. A Roman senator worth millions, Seneca would sleep on the floor and eat nothing but stale bread for days. Why? To remind himself, this too I can endure. When fate eventually threw him into exile, he didn't crumble. He'd already walked that path in his mind. Here's your challenge. For the next 5 minutes today, pick one comfort: your bed, your morning coffee, the ability to call a friend, and mentally let it go. Don't just think about it, feel its absence. Then, when you return to reality, observe the shift. That first sip of coffee tastes richer, doesn't it? Pillow feels softer. Negative visualization isn't about dwelling on darkness, it's about using contrast to reveal the light that was always there. As Seneca put it, set aside a certain number of days to eat only the cheapest fare, wear rough clothes, and ask yourself, is this the condition I so feared? The answer, you'll find, is where true freedom begins. Marcus Aurelius once wrote in his private journal, a reminder that would echo through centuries: you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Not as a morbid warning, but as a wake-up call to the sheer preciousness of the present. The Stoics understood something we often forget, that life isn't measured in years, but in moments. 2,000 years ago, they wrestled with the same human tendency we face today, the pull of distraction, the habit of living everywhere but here. Seneca lamented how people lose the day in waiting for the night, and the night in fearing the dawn. Sound familiar? Swap scrolls for screens, and his words could describe our modern addiction to digital escapism. The chariots and marketplaces of Rome may be gone, but the noise hasn't changed, only its form. Here's the radical Stoic proposition: happiness isn't found in some distant future where all your boxes are checked. It's hidden in plain sight, in the ordinary moments we rush through. The warmth of sunlight through a window, the taste of your morning coffee before it goes cold, the way someone's eyes crinkle when they laugh at your joke. These aren't just passing details, they're the fabric of a meaningful life. The Stoics called this prosoch, the practice of mindful attention, not as a passive state, but as an active choice to engage fully with whatever is before you. Imagine standing knee-deep in a river, trying to grasp the water upstream while the current slips through your fingers. That's what happens when we fixate on the future or dwell on the past. The present is the only water we can truly hold. Let's make this practical. Try what I call the pause practice, a modern twist on ancient Stoic exercises. Set a gentle alarm to chime once an hour. When it sounds, stop wherever you are. Notice three things. One sensation may be the weight of your feet on the floor. One sound, the hum of appliances or birds outside. And one thought passing through your mind without judging it. This isn't about emptying your head or achieving Zen. It's about interrupting autopilot, like hitting the refresh button on your awareness. The Stoics didn't have smartwatches, but they had sundials, using the moving shadow as a prompt to ask, "Am I using this hour well?" What makes this so powerful isn't the pause itself, but what happens after. You start catching yourself mid-distraction, reaching for your phone during a lull in conversation, or mentally rewriting yesterday's argument while your child shows you their drawing. Those are the moments when Stoic wisdom becomes real, not in grand gestures, but in the decision to look up, to listen fully, to taste the meal instead of just consuming it. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly, give yourself a gift, the present moment, not tomorrow's promotion, not next year's vacation, but the breath you're taking right now. That's where life is actually happening, and the wildest part, you don't have to earn it, buy it, or wait for it. It's already here. Diogenes, the famous Cynic philosopher who lived in a barrel and owned nothing but a cloak and a wooden bowl, embodied self-sufficiency so radically that when he saw a child drinking water with cupped hands, he threw away his bowl, realizing even that was excess. The Stoics called this autarkeia, the art of finding completeness within yourself, independent of external validations or possessions. It's not about rejecting comfort or living in austerity for its own sake, but about recognizing that your worth and peace don't hinge on anything outside your control. Imagine standing in a storm with an unshakable center, not because the wind stops blowing, but because you've anchored yourself to something deeper. Fast forward to today, how many of us feel phantom vibrations in our pockets when our phone isn't there, or panic when Wi-Fi drops, as if the world might crumble without that next notification? Modern life has traded barrels for bandwidth, but the principle remains. Digital detoxes, minimalist lifestyles, even the tiny house movement, these aren't just trends. They're unconscious echoes of Diogenes' barrel, attempts to reclaim autonomy in a world that constantly demands our dependence. The Stoics would argue that every attachment, whether to a smartphone, a job title, or a social media persona, is a tiny thread tying your happiness to forces you can't command. Here's the liberating truth. Self-sufficiency isn't about having less. It's about needing less. Take money, for example. The Stoics weren't against wealth. Seneca was one of Rome's richest men, but they warned against letting it define you. As Epictetus put it, freedom isn't secured by filling your coffers, but by emptying your desires. That's why modern parallels like financial independence movements resonate so deeply. They're not just about saving money, they're about buying back your freedom to choose how you spend your time and attention. So let's make this practical. Think of one thing you rely on daily for comfort or validation. Your morning coffee, your Instagram likes, even the reassurance of a packed schedule. Now imagine going without it for a week. Not as punishment, but as an experiment in autarkeia. What would you discover about your own resilience the first time you skip that caffeine hit? The headache might roar. But by day 3, you might notice the birds singing outside your window, something you drowned out with espresso fumes. Or when you silence notifications, the initial itch to scroll gives way to conversations you'd been too distracted to have. This isn't about glorifying discomfort. It's about proving to yourself that you're more adaptable than you think. The Stoics knew the fewer hooks we have in the world, the less life can yank us around. Diogenes didn't live in a barrel because he had to. He chose it to show that freedom isn't found in possessions, but in the space between I want and I am. And that's a barrel or a blank screen or a quiet morning any of us can step into whenever we're ready. Marcus Aurelius didn't write his meditations for fame or posterity. He scribbled those words in the dead of night by flickering lamplight as a personal anchor amidst the chaos of ruling an empire. That's the power of Stoic journaling. It's not about crafting pretty prose for others to admire. It's about holding up a mirror to your mind, untangling your thoughts, and spotting the patterns that quietly steer your days. Think of it like a daily debrief with your wisest self. The emperor's journal wasn't filled with grand declarations. It was raw, repetitive, even clumsy at times. But that's exactly what made it transformative. He'd ask himself versions of 3 questions we can all borrow. What went well today? Where did I falter? And what truly belongs to me in this mess? Let's break down why this works. First, what went well isn't just a gratitude exercise. It's a spotlight on your agency. Maybe you paused before snapping at a coworker, or noticed the way sunlight hit your coffee cup and chose to savor it. THESE, Chinese letter victories train your brain to spot moments where you did have control, countering that helpless feeling life sometimes throws at us. Next, what could improve isn't self-flagellation. The Stoics called this hypomnemata, a compassionate audit. Did you waste an hour doom-scrolling? Did you assume the worst about a friend's text? Write it without judgment, like a scientist noting data. The goal isn't shame, it's awareness, because here's the secret: you can't change what you don't see. But the real magic lies in the third question: what's in my control? This is where you separate the signal from the noise. Your colleague's rude email. Not yours to fix, your decision to respond with professionalism. Entirely yours. The traffic jam that made you late, outside your hands. The breath you took to stay calm in the gridlock. That's your domain. Over time, this question becomes a mental sieve, catching the distractions and letting only what matters through. Here's your challenge: grab any notebook or even your phone's notes app and try this for 7 days. Don't overthink it. 5 minutes at bedtime is enough. Day 1 might feel awkward, like trying to recall what you ate for breakfast, but by day 3, you'll start noticing themes. Maybe you'll see how often you blame external factors for your mood, or how tiny acts of patience ripple through your relationships. And here's the unexpected twist: the act of writing itself becomes a Stoic practice. As your hand moves across the page, you're literally slowing down the whirlwind of thoughts, giving your rational mind time to catch up. Imagine standing at the edge of a murky pond, tossing pebbles into the water. At first, the ripples overlap chaotically, but as you keep throwing, patterns emerge. Journaling works the same way. Those scattered frustrations, fleeting joys, and half-formed realizations start connecting. You might notice that your best days begin with 10 minutes of silence, or that your worst moods follow certain triggers. Marcus didn't have neuroscience, but he intuited what we now know. Writing consolidates memory, regulates emotions, and most importantly, creates distance between you and your impulses. You're no longer drowning in the pond, you're the observer on the shore, watching the ripples with clarity. By week's end, you won't just have pages filled with words. You'll have something far more valuable, a map of your own mind, and that's where true freedom begins, not in controlling the world around you, but in understanding the world within you. Because as the Stoics knew, the unexamined life isn't just unfulfilled, it's infinitely more fragile. Marcus Aurelius scribbled a line in his private journal that would become one of Stoicism's most powerful mantras. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. At first glance, it sounds like a paradox. How can a roadblock double as a path forward? But this isn't just wordplay. It's the blueprint for what modern thinkers now call an antifragile mindset. Unlike mere resilience, where you endure hardships, antifragility means growing stronger because of them. Think of a muscle tearing under stress only to rebuild thicker, or a forest fire that clears dead wood, allowing new growth to thrive. The Stoics didn't just survive adversity, they used it as raw material for transformation. Take Abraham Lincoln, a man whose life reads like a Stoic textbook on turning obstacles into fuel. Before becoming the president who held a fractured nation together, he lost his job, failed in business, was defeated in 8 elections, and suffered the death of 2 sons. Most would have crumbled under the weight of so much loss, but Lincoln had a habit of reframing setbacks as setups. After one political defeat, he wrote, "I am too familiar with disappointments to be very much chagrined." That's not indifference, it's the quiet recognition that every no was steering him toward a yes he couldn't yet see. When the Civil War erupted, it was this same mindset that allowed him to navigate unimaginable pressure without collapsing into despair. The impediment, the war itself, became the crucible that forged his legacy. Here's the Stoic secret: obstacles aren't just hurdles to overcome, they're mirrors revealing what we're made of. A delayed flight tests your patience. A broken relationship teaches you about your boundaries. A career setback forces you to distinguish between ego and purpose. The ancient Greeks had a word for this alchemy: metamorphosis. The caterpillar doesn't resist the chrysalis. It surrenders to the messy, uncomfortable process because it knows instinctively that struggle is part of the design. So let's bring this home. Pause for a moment and recall a past obstacle that once felt insurmountable, maybe a rejection, a health scare, or a financial blow. Now trace its fingerprints forward. Did it uncover strength you didn't know you had, redirect you toward something better, teach you to rely on inner resources over external validation? That's antifragility in action. The Stoics would argue that the moments you once cursed as setbacks were actually the universe's way of sanding down your rough edges, preparing you for what was coming next. Epictetus, born into slavery, put it bluntly: difficulties show men what they are, not what they wish they were, not what others tell them to be, but what they are. And once you've seen that truth, something shifts. You stop praying for an easy life and start building a life that can't be easily shaken. The next time you hit a wall, you won't just look for a way around it. You'll remember the wall itself might be the way. Think about the last time you poured your heart into something, a project, a relationship, a goal, only to have it fall short of what you'd hoped. That sting of disappointment isn't just painful. It can feel like a personal failure. But here's where Stoicism flips the script. What if the value wasn't in the outcome at all, but in the integrity of your effort? Epictetus, who knew a thing or two about facing unfair odds, put it this way: in life, our first job is this: to divide and distinguish things into 2 categories: externals I cannot control and choices I can. Where, then, will I place my attention? This cuts straight through the noise of modern hustle culture, where success is often measured in likes, promotions, and visible wins. The Stoics weren't against hard work, far from it. They believed in showing up fully, but with one crucial difference: they divorced their self-worth from the results. Imagine a basketball player sinking every shot in practice, playing with flawless technique, only to miss the game-winning shot. Hustle culture might call that a failure. Stoicism would call it a triumph because the player controlled what they could. Their preparation, their focus, their composure, the final score that belonged to fortune. Epictetus used the analogy of dice to drive this home. The dice fall as they will, but how you throw them, that's your art. You could roll with skill and still land on a losing number. Does that make you a bad player? Only if you confuse luck with skill. This mindset isn't about apathy. It's about redirecting your energy toward what actually shapes your character. The writer who submits their manuscript to publishers isn't guaranteed a bestseller, but they can guarantee their dedication to the craft. The entrepreneur pitching investors might face rejection after rejection, but their control lies in the clarity of their vision, not the whims of the market. Now contrast this with the burnout-inducing mantra of grind at all costs. How many people push themselves to exhaustion, tying their worth to metrics that were never in their hands to begin with? The Stoic approach isn't a free pass to mediocrity. It's a liberation from the roller coaster of external validation. When you focus on playing the game well rather than fixating on the scoreboard, something unexpected happens. You perform better. Pressure dissipates, creativity flows, and when outcomes don't go your way, you're left not with shame, but with the quiet confidence of knowing you gave it your all. So here's the challenge. Next time you set a goal, separate the work from the reward. Train like an athlete obsessed with form, not medals. Write like an author in love with sentences, not bestseller lists. Love like someone who values connection over guarantees. Because here's the secret Stoics knew centuries ago. Mastery isn't about controlling life's dice. It's about throwing them with integrity, then walking away, win or lose, with your head held high. Stoic contentment isn't about settling for less, it's about fully embracing what's already yours. Imagine standing in front of an open refrigerator, staring at a full shelf of food, yet feeling unsatisfied because you're craving something else. That's the paradox Seneca warned about when he wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." The hunger isn't in the stomach, it's in the mind. The Stoics called this eudaimonia, a flourishing that comes not from accumulating, but from appreciating. It's the difference between clutching at the next thing and resting in the enoughness of now. Take two people walking through the same park. One is glued to their phone, scrolling through photos of tropical vacations, muttering about how their local scenery doesn't compare. The other notices the way sunlight filters through the leaves, the crunch of gravel underfoot, the laughter of kids playing nearby. Both are physically present, but only one is there. This is the essence of Stoic contentment. It's not about denying yourself pleasures, but about waking up to the ones already within reach. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts, not the quantity of your possessions." Now consider the minimalist movement, often misunderstood as living with bare walls and empty closets. At its core, it's a modern echo of Stoicism. Both strip away the noise to reveal what actually matters. A minimalist isn't someone who hates stuff. They're someone who refuses to let stuff own them. Contrast that with consumerism, where the chase for the next purchase becomes a treadmill of temporary highs. The latest phone model delivers a dopamine hit, but within weeks, it's just another object on your desk. The thrill fades, the payment plan remains. The Stoics saw this cycle 2,000 years ago. When you've lost everything, Epictetus said, you'll realize you never needed most of it in the first place. Here's where it gets practical. Grab a notebook and list 3 things you already have that bring you quiet joy. not the flashy, Instagrammable moments, but the steady, uncelebrated ones. Maybe it's the weight of a well-worn book in your hands, the way your dog greets you at the door, or the first sip of tea in the morning when the house is still quiet. These aren't small things, they're the foundation of a life well lived. The Stoics would argue that the more you focus on this list, the less power external cravings have over you. Seneca took this further with his poverty practice, periodically wearing old clothes, eating simple meals, sleeping on a thin mattress, not as punishment, but as a reset button for appreciation. Let the soul be reminded, he wrote, how little it takes to sustain the person to whom nothing is lacking. You don't have to sell your belongings or move into a tiny house. But try this: next time you're tempted by a new purchase, pause and ask, what do I already own that serves this same need? The answer might surprise you. Contentment isn't found in having everything. It's found in wanting nothing more from what you already hold. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who lived simply even as Rome's elite chased extravagance, offered a radical idea for his time. We should treat our belongings as travelers treat items at an inn, ready to leave them behind without distress. Fast forward 2,000 years, and we've turned the world into one endless digital inn, constantly checking into new tabs, new feeds, new purchases, as if our worth depends on how much we consume. But here's the irony: the more we gorge on content, the hungrier we feel. The Stoic virtue of temperance wasn't about deprivation. It was about recognizing that every click, every scroll, every add to cart is a tiny vote for what owns your attention. Think about your phone for a second. How many times today have you reached for it without thinking? That automatic reflex isn't just habit, it's a modern-day test of self-mastery. Ancient Stoics warned against overindulgence in food and wine because they dull the mind. Today's equivalent, the endless buffet of outrage news, comparison traps on social media, and the dopamine hits of online shopping. Each one promises satisfaction but delivers only more craving. Seneca saw this pattern centuries ago. It is not that we have so little time, but that we lose so much of it. Replace time with mental clarity, and you've diagnosed the digital age. Here's the experiment Musonius would suggest. Pick one area where consumption leaves you drained instead of nourished. Maybe it's the hourly news checks that leave you anxious but no more informed, or the influencer accounts you follow out of habit, even as they erode your contentment. For 1 week, treat that input like a Stoic would, not with rigid denial, but with conscious choice. Turn off notifications, move the app off your home screen. Or try what the ancients called premeditatio malorum. Imagine losing access entirely. Would your life actually be poorer or freer? The goal isn't to live like a hermit. It's to spot the difference between consumption that serves you and consumption that steals from you. When Musonius taught that luxury makes the soul weak, he wasn't shunning comfort. He was warning against letting comfort become a cage. That Amazon package might bring a fleeting thrill, but does it strengthen your character? The 20th political hot take of the day might feel urgent, but does it expand your wisdom? Temperance is the razor that pares away the excess, leaving only what truly feeds you. So ask yourself, what's one thing you're consuming, whether media, gossip, or goods, that leaves you emptier than before you started? The answer might surprise you, because here's the secret the Stoics knew. When you stop filling every silence with noise, you start hearing the voice that matters most, your own. Marcus Aurelius began each day with a ritual we might find startling in its simplicity. He thanked the people who shaped him, living or dead, not in a grand speech but in the quiet of his mind. When you arise in the morning, he wrote, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. This wasn't just optimism. It was a deliberate practice of anchoring himself in gratitude before facing the chaos of ruling an empire. The Stoics didn't wait for gratitude to strike them like lightning. They cultivated it daily, like tending a fire that could warm even the coldest days. Modern science now confirms what these ancient philosophers knew instinctively. A landmark study from the University of California found that participants who jotted down just 3 things they were grateful for each night reported significantly higher happiness levels in as little as 3 weeks. But here's the twist: their circumstances hadn't changed. They still faced the same jobs, relationships, and challenges. What shifted was their attention. Like Marcus listing his mentors from his grandfather's patience to his teacher's honesty, they'd trained their minds to spot the good woven into ordinary moments. Gratitude, it turns out, isn't just a feeling, it's a lens. Imagine 2 versions of your morning routine. One starts with groaning at the alarm, scrolling through headlines that spike your cortisol, and rushing out the door already drained. The other begins with 60 seconds of stillness, noticing the weight of the blanket, the sound of birds outside, the fact that you have a bed at all. The same day unfolds for both versions, but which one leaves you better equipped to handle its surprises? The Stoics treated gratitude as mental armor. Seneca described it as the soul's way of taking inventory, a daily audit that prevents life's blessings from becoming invisible through familiarity. Here's where it gets practical. Tonight, try this Stoic-inspired ritual before sleep. Name 3 specific moments from your day that sparked gratitude, not broad strokes like my family, but concrete details. The way your coworker handed you a coffee just how you like it, the stranger who held the elevator, the quiet 10 minutes where sunlight pooled on your desk. Then take it one step further. Text one person from that list, not a generic thanks, but a sentence that shows you noticed. I appreciated how you listened without interrupting today. It meant more than you know. This does something remarkable. It strengthens your gratitude muscles while creating ripples of connection. The Stoics believed gratitude was a form of justice, a repayment for gifts we can never fully return. When Marcus thanked his rhetoric teacher for showing him not to side with the green or blue teams at the races, he was acknowledging a debt, not of money, but of perspective. Your version might thank a friend for their patience during your rough patch, or a parent for the way they made vegetables taste good when you were 6. These acknowledgments don't just brighten someone else's day, they rewire your brain to spot goodness hiding in plain sight. So here's the challenge. For 1 week, pair morning and evening gratitude like bookends to your day. At dawn, borrow Marcus' habit of silently thanking those who have shaped you. At dusk, borrow science's pen to record 3 specifics, and somewhere in between, let one person know they're on your list. You might discover what the Stoics did, that gratitude isn't just a reaction to happiness. Often, it's the cause. Picture this: you're standing on a mountaintop, looking down at the city below. Cars move like ants, buildings shrink to toy blocks, and the argument you had this morning feels impossibly distant. The Stoics called this the view from above, a mental exercise where you pull back, not just physically, but temporally, imagining your life from the perspective of the cosmos. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, reminding himself, think of the whole of existence, of which you are the tiniest part. It wasn't about diminishing his struggles, but about seeing them in their true proportion. Here's the modern equivalent. Open a satellite map on your phone and zoom all the way out. Watch as your street dissolves into a neighborhood, then a city, a country, a continent, until the entire planet is just a pale blue dot. That meeting you're dreading, the bill you're stressing over, from this vantage point, they're invisible. Not because they don't matter, but because most of what consumes our daily anxiety doesn't even register at scale. The Stoics weren't suggesting we ignore our problems. They were teaching us to stop inflating them into catastrophes. Take a work conflict that's been keeping you up at night. Now imagine describing it to someone 100 years from now. Would the details even make sense? The office politics, the tone of an email, the perceived slight. These are scripts we write and then convince ourselves are unchangeable. Epictetus offered a liberating question. Will this matter in a year or 5? If the answer's no, why grant it so much power today? Try this tonight before bed. Step onto your mental balcony. Picture your worries as objects on a table: a spilled coffee, a torn letter, a cracked screen. Then imagine lifting higher until the table becomes a speck in your home a speck in your town a speck on the planet. That's the Stoic telescope. It doesn't erase pain, but it reveals how much space we've let it occupy. So here's the challenge. Pick one current worry and ask, how will this look from orbit? Not dismissively, but curiously. The deadline gnawing at you, the awkward encounter replaying in your mind, seen from the stars. They're not trivial. They're just human, and that's the gift of perspective. It doesn't shrink your life. It gives you room to breathe inside it. Seneca once wrote, "Noise is the most impertinent of all forms of interruption." He wasn't just complaining about loud neighbors, he was pointing to something deeper. The Stoics saw silence not as empty space, but as fertile ground for clarity. Imagine trying to hear a whisper in a thunderstorm. That's what modern life does to our inner voice, drowning it in notifications, background music, and the constant hum of distractions. 2,000 years ago, philosophers sought out quiet gardens and simple rooms to think. Today, we carry noise factories in our pockets, feeding on endless scrolls and pings. The difference isn't just technological, it's psychological. Consider how often you're truly alone with your thoughts, not while half listening to a podcast or waiting for a reply, but in purposeful stillness. The Stoics practiced this daily, not as a luxury, but as mental hygiene. Marcus Aurelius would begin his mornings in quiet reflection before facing the chaos of ruling Rome. Epictetus, teaching in a crowded city, still carved out moments to retire into yourself. Their wisdom rings eerily prescient now, when the average person checks their phone 96 times a day. We've confused connectivity with depth, mistaking the chatter of the world for the voice of our own reason. Here's the experiment. Try a 5-minute silent walk today. No headphones, no podcasts, no phone in hand. Not as meditation, but as simple observation. Notice how your mind rebels at first, itching for stimulation. That discomfort is exactly what the Stoics trained themselves to sit with. Seneca described this beautifully. You must retreat into yourself as far as possible. He wasn't advocating isolation, but rather creating space to distinguish your own values from the world's clamor. Those quiet minutes become a sieve, separating the trivial from the essential. Ancient philosophers had the advantage of literal retreats, Seneca's country villas, Marcus' military tents. But stillness isn't about geography, it's about intention. You can find it in an elevator ride where you don't pull out your phone, or in the pause between meetings when you close your eyes instead of refreshing your inbox. The modern equivalent of a Stoic garden might be turning off notifications during your commute, or eating lunch without a screen. The goal isn't to eliminate noise completely, that's impossible, but to build pockets of quiet where your thoughts can breathe. Watch what happens during your silent walk. At first, you might mentally replay conversations or make to-do lists, but if you persist, something shifts. The wind in the trees registers differently. Your footsteps become a rhythm rather than just movement. A problem that seemed insoluble suddenly has edges you can grasp. This is what the Stoics called the inner citadel, not some mystical state, but but the practical clarity that comes when you stop drowning out your own mind. Seneca warned that the person who runs from quiet is running from themselves. We fill silence because facing our unfiltered thoughts can be uncomfortable. But in that discomfort lies the raw material for growth. Your 5-minute walk might reveal lingering resentment you've been ignoring, or a creative idea you've been too distracted to nurture. The Stoics knew you can't control the world's volume, but you can always find the mute button for your soul. Press it daily and watch how much louder your wisdom becomes. Death isn't typically a topic we associate with motivation, but the Stoics turned it into one of their most powerful tools. They called it Memento Mori, Latin for remember you must die. At first glance, it sounds morbid, even unsettling, but strip away the cultural baggage and you'll find something radically life-affirming. A practice not about dwelling on endings, but about honoring the gift of each moment. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly in his private journal, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." This wasn't a threat, it was a wake-up call. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff, not to inspire fear, but to sharpen your focus on the view. That's Memento Mori in action, a lens that clarifies what truly matters. Consider how deadlines work. A project with no end date often languishes in procrastination purgatory, but add a ticking clock and suddenly distractions fade. Priorities snap into focus. The Stoics applied this same principle to life itself. By keeping mortality in view, they cut through the noise of trivial concerns. Seneca wrote, "It's not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." He wasn't scolding, he was pointing out how easily we confuse busyness with meaning. The meeting that runs late, the hour lost to mindless scrolling, the grudges we nurse like heirlooms, how many of these would survive an honest reckoning with time's limits? Here's the paradox: confronting life's finitude doesn't shrink your world, it expands it. Steve Jobs famously said, "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life." That's the modern echo of Stoicism. When Jobs faced a cancer diagnosis, he didn't retreat into despair. He asked, "If today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I'm about to do?" When the answer was no too often, he changed course. Memento Mori isn't about macabre fixation. It's about using the certainty of an ending to illuminate how you're living now. Try this exercise. Picture yourself at 90, looking back on your life as it stands today. What will you wish you'd spent more time doing, less time worrying about? The answers aren't usually more emails or more resentment. They're often startlingly simple: more laughter with loved ones, more courage to pursue what lit you up, more presence in ordinary moments. The Stoics didn't use mortality as a scare tactic. They wielded it as a sculptor's chisel, carving away everything that wasn't essential. So here's the challenge. Tonight, as you turn off the lights, ask yourself, if this were my last day, would I be at peace with how I spent it? Not in a dramatic movie ending way, but in the quiet truth of whether you showed up for what matters. You don't need a near-death experience to live like you're running out of time. You just need to remember that you are, and let that awareness sharpen your choices like a whetstone on steel. Because the real power of Memento Mori isn't in the dying, it's in the waking up. Compassion in Stoicism wears an unexpected face, one that loves deeply yet holds loosely. Hierocles, a Stoic philosopher, visualized this through his famous circles of concern. Picture a series of concentric rings. At the center, you. The next ring holds your immediate family, then friends, community, strangers, and finally all humanity. The Stoic aim not to dismantle these circles, but to consciously draw each one closer to the center. expanding your sense of connection without collapsing your boundaries. It's the art of caring for others without needing anything from them, a distinction that changes everything. Take the caregiver tending to an ailing parent. The conventional approach might fuse love with obligation, where exhaustion breeds resentment or self-worth hinges on fixing the unfixable. Stoic compassion rewrites this script. It asks, can you sit with their pain without absorbing it as your own? Can you offer comfort without demanding gratitude as payment? Epictetus, who taught that suffering stems not from events but our judgments about them, would say yes. If you kiss your child or your wife, he advised, say to yourself that you are kissing a human being, for when they die, you will not be disturbed. This isn't cold detachment, it's the recognition that love thrives when freed from the illusion of control. Imagine a nurse in an overwhelmed hospital ward. She administers medication with steady hands, listens to fears without flinching, yet clocks out without carrying the weight of outcomes she can't dictate. That's Stoic compassion in action, giving fully while understanding that healing isn't hers to command. Marcus Aurelius modeled this as emperor, writing, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart." The secret lies in that last phrase. Stoics don't love half-heartedly. They love with a wholeness that doesn't fracture when circumstances shift. Here's the pivot. Attachment whispers, "I need you to be okay for me to be okay." Stoic compassion answers, "I'll stand with you whether you're okay or not." Think of a parent watching their child struggle with a school project. The attached version hovers, micromanaging to ease their own anxiety. The Stoic version offers guidance but respects the child's autonomy to stumble and learn. Both approaches look like love, but one drains while the other sustains. So how do we practice this? Start small. Next time you're tempted to fix someone's problem, pause. Ask, am I acting from their need or my discomfort? When a friend vents, try listening without rushing to advice, trusting their resilience as much as your support. Hierarchical circles remind us that empathy isn't about erasing distances, but bridging them with clear eyes. You can donate to a homeless stranger without expecting their transformation. You can advocate for justice without tying your peace to the outcome. Stoic love is a paradox. It's the open hand that gives freely, yet knows when to release. Not because it cares less, but because it understands that true strength lies in caring without conditions. The caregiver who tends to others while tending to herself, the activist who fights for change without burning out, they've grasped a truth the Stoics carved in stone. Compassion is renewable energy, but only when it flows without dams of dependency. So reflect on this. Where in your life could love grow lighter by becoming looser? The Stoics drew a line in the sand between desires, some natural and necessary, others fabricated and endless. Imagine your hand cupped under a waterfall. The water you drink quenches thirst, the rest slips through your fingers. That's the essence of their philosophy. Distinguish what truly nourishes from what merely distracts. Epicurus, though not a Stoic, captured this perfectly with his concept of the enough threshold, the point where needs are met and excess adds nothing but burden. Bread satisfies hunger, a gold-plated loaf, that's vanity masquerading as necessity. Modern life has blurred this distinction with what psychologists call luxury creep, the slow shift of wants into needs. A smartphone was once a luxury, now we panic without one. Air conditioning, once a rarity, becomes unbearable to live without. Each upgrade digs the hole of dependency deeper, convincing us we've reached baseline when we've really just moved the goalposts. Seneca saw this coming. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. The irony, the more we acquire, the narrower our enough window becomes. Take coffee culture. There's nothing wrong with enjoying a well-brewed cup. But when a $12 artisanal latte becomes a daily requirement for happiness, we've crossed into unnatural desire. The Stoics wouldn't begrudge the pleasure, they'd question the dependence. Epictetus, born into slavery, owned nothing but a wooden bowl until he saw a child drink from cupped hands and realized even that was excess. His joy didn't shrink with his possessions, it expanded because his freedom wasn't tied to objects. Here's the challenge: for 1 week, resist one non-essential purchase you'd normally make without thought. The fancy coffee, the impulse app purchase, the streaming subscription you barely use. This isn't about austerity, it's about auditing the invisible threads tethering your contentment to external things. Notice what arises: boredom, frustration, maybe even a pang of identity loss. But I'm the kind of person who always gets the premium version. Those discomforts are the friction of breaking a habit, not a lack of something vital. The Stoics practiced voluntary discomfort not to punish themselves but to prove a point. You adapt faster than you think. That first skipped latte might feel like deprivation. By day 3, you might rediscover the quiet pleasure of homemade brew. By day 7, you'll have answered the most liberating question Stoicism poses: how much of what I crave was never mine to need in the first place? Luxury creep thrives on forgotten alternatives. Your job isn't to reject comfort, just to remember you had happiness before it, and you'll have happiness after. Seneca called anger brief insanity, a fire that burns hottest in those who stand closest to it. Picture this: you're cut off in traffic, fingers tightening on the wheel, blood pounding in your ears. That surge isn't just emotion, it's a biological hijacking. Your prefrontal cortex, the rational decision maker, gets overridden by the amygdala, flooding your system with cortisol and adrenaline. Ancient Rome didn't have highways, but Seneca saw the same pattern in senators throwing in pots during debates or gladiator fans screaming for blood. No plague has cost the human race more. He wrote in on anger, not because rage is powerful, but because it makes us powerless. What makes anger so deceptive is how righteous it feels in the moment. That driver who swerved into your lane isn't just inconsiderate, they're a personal insult. The coworker who dismisses your idea isn't merely disagreeing, they're undermining your worth. Anger dresses itself up as justice, whispering that this emotion isn't just acceptable but necessary. Seneca saw through this masquerade. Other vices revolt against the best among us. This one rebels against itself. The very energy we think defends us actually exhausts us. Road rage might last minutes, but the biochemical aftermath, elevated blood pressure, impaired focus, lingers for hours. Here's the Stoic intervention. Insert a single question between trigger and reaction. Is this worth my peace? Not as a platitude, but as a circuit breaker. When Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal, he wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." That pause, whether in traffic or a tense meeting, creates space to choose rather than react. Modern psychology confirms this. The 6-second rule: most adrenaline subsides within that window, mirrors Seneca's advice to walk back from the precipice of wrath. Try this reframe next time anger flares. Imagine the offending person on their deathbed, not to morbidly shame yourself, but to gain perspective. The barrister who messed up your order, the neighbor who parks too close, seen through the lens of mortality, their actions shrink to human scale. Anger thrives on abstraction, painting others as caricatures. Compassion, even the barest acknowledgement of shared frailty, dissolves its fuel. Stoicism doesn't demand apathy. It teaches discernment. There's a difference between the anger that mobilizes against injustice and the anger that corrodes over trivialities. One builds bridges, the other burns them. As Seneca put it, the sword of justice has no scabbard. Use it when needed, but never leave it unsheathed in your own heart. Your peace is too precious to mortgage to every irritation. The Stoics didn't just admire nature, they saw it as the ultimate blueprint for how to live. When they spoke of living according to nature, they weren't just talking about fresh air and sunshine. They meant aligning with the fundamental rhythms of existence, the way a river flows without resistance, or a tree grows toward light without grasping. Cleans, the second head of the Stoic school, wrote of the universe as a living being with a single soul and a single nature. That harmony wasn't poetic fluff, it was a call to strip away the artificial layers we pile onto life. Think of how a storm doesn't rage because it's offended, it simply is. A bird doesn't fret over yesterday's missed worm, it hunts again at dawn. Nature doesn't complicate what doesn't need complicating. Modern life, by contrast, often feels like a Rube Goldberg machine over-engineered and prone to collapse under its own mechanisms. We schedule relaxation, monetize hobbies, and outsource basic joys to apps. The Stoics would ask, when did we decide that happiness required so much scaffolding? Seneca mocked those who travel to see mountains but ignore the soul's peaks. He wasn't against adventure, he was warning against mistaking motion for meaning. A sunset doesn't charge admission. A forest path doesn't demand you post about it. Nature's simplicity isn't just aesthetic, it's an operating system for contentment. Here's the experiment. Sometime this week, leave your devices behind and walk somewhere green, a park, a trail, even a quiet street with trees. Not for exercise or photos, but to notice the way shadows dapple the ground, the sound of leaves rustling like pages turning, the weight of your feet on earth instead of pavement. Cleans believed the universe spoke through these details if we'd only listen. You don't need to meditate or journal, just let your mind sync with the pace of growing things. The goal isn't to get something from nature, but to remember you're part of it. Recall the last time nature caught you off guard, maybe the hush after a snowfall, or the sudden scent of rain on hot pavement. That unplanned moment likely held more peace than a dozen curated self-care rituals. Why? Because nature doesn't negotiate. A wave doesn't care if you're CEO or cashier, it crashes the same. In a world that constantly measures us, nature offers the rare gift of indifference, not coldness, but freedom from performance. The Stoics treasured this. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Look deep into nature and you'll understand everything better," he wasn't being metaphorical. He was pointing to the ultimate teacher, a world that thrives without striving, and in doing so shows us how. So ask yourself, when did you last let stillness sink in, not as a pause between tasks, but as its own kind of purpose? Not every walk needs a step count. Not every quiet moment needs filling. The trees outside your window have weathered storms without calendars, without to-do lists, without ever once asking if they're productive enough. There's wisdom in that, and the crazy part, it's been there all along, waiting for you to remember. Imagine Seneca walking into a modern coffee shop, not to admire the espresso machines, but to observe the sea of faces bent over glowing rectangles. The man who warned against the crowd 2,000 years ago would recognize today's digital mob instantly. Scroll, compare, ache, repeat. It's the same human impulse, just amplified by algorithms designed to exploit it. He'd likely point out the irony. We've never been more connected, yet never more starved for genuine connection. Studies now confirm what the Stoics intuited. Heavy social media users report higher levels of envy, lower self-esteem, and a distorted sense of reality. One survey found that 58% of people feel worse about their own lives after scrolling, yet they return daily like moths to a flame that burns but doesn't warm. The Stoic antidote: detachment not from people, but from the platforms that turn relationships into performances. Picture your Instagram feed through Seneca's eyes, a highlight reel masquerading as reality, where everyone's vacations look perfect, their meals artfully arranged, their children perpetually photogenic. He'd call this what it is: a modern-day pageant of illusions. The Roman philosopher warned against envying those who shine in public but are miserable at home. Yet today we do more than envy. We curate those very illusions ourselves. Every filtered selfie, every staged moment chips away at what the Stoics prized most: authenticity. Here's the challenge: for the next 24 hours, step off the carousel. Silence notifications, delete apps if you must, notice what arises. The phantom limb urge to check, the fear of missing out, the quiet relief when the mental static fades. Like Seneca's practice of wearing shabby clothes to test his self-worth, this fast isn't about rejecting technology. It's about reclaiming your attention from forces that profit by fragmenting it. The first hour might feel like withdrawal. By hour 12, you might rediscover forgotten rhythms: the pleasure of a book without interruption, a conversation without documentation, a thought without instant broadcast. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events," he couldn't have imagined Twitter storms or TikTok trends, but his wisdom holds: every swipe is a choice. Every like is a vote for what owns your focus. The Stoics didn't advocate isolation, they practiced selective engagement. After your fast, you might find yourself posting less and living more, not because you've quit social media, but because you've remembered who you were before the world started scrolling past. Consider Cato the Younger, the Roman senator who stood barefoot in the Forum while his political enemies paraded in gold-embroidered robes. When offered bribes to abandon his principles, he laughed, not out of arrogance, but from genuine amusement at the thought that luxury could sway him. His contemporaries called him stubborn. History remembers him as the man who chose death over compromise, drinking poison rather than beg for mercy from Julius Caesar. But here's what often gets overlooked: Cato wasn't just making a political statement. He was demonstrating a profound Stoic truth: that happiness rooted in externals is borrowed, while contentment anchored in virtue is unshakable. Then there's Epictetus, the former slave whose teachings would outlive emperors. Born in chains, he gained freedom only to show others how to free their minds. His school had no marble columns, just a simple stool where he'd sit, rubbing his lame leg while dissecting human nature. When a student complained about life's unfairness, Epictetus pointed to his own twisted limb. "This too I can make use of." His power came not from ignoring pain, but from refusing to let it dictate his worth. While Rome's elite chased status symbols, he measured wealth in self-mastery, proving that the most enduring freedoms aren't granted, they're cultivated. Closer to our time, James Stockdale, the Navy pilot shot down over Vietnam, channeled Epictetus in a Hanoi prison cell. For 7 years of torture and isolation, he clung to one Stoic question: what's within my power here? Not his captor's cruelty, not his broken body, but his choice to endure with dignity. After his release, he'd say the experience didn't break him, it revealed him. Stockdale's resilience wasn't about toughness. It was the quiet recognition that his value wasn't tied to his circumstances, while his fellow prisoners crumbled under the weight of "why me?" He focused on "what now?" These aren't just ancient tales of superhuman willpower. They're mirrors held up to our own lives. Maybe your role model isn't a philosopher or war hero, but the grandmother who finds joy in her tiny apartment, her happiness unscaled by square footage. Or the coworker who radiates calm during layoffs, not because they're immune to fear, but because they know their worth isn't printed on a paycheck. Stoicism's real legacy lies in these everyday examples, people who have discovered that contentment isn't the absence of struggle, but the presence of perspective. So look around. Who in your orbit embodies this quiet strength? The single parent stretching a paycheck yet never skimping on hugs. The friend who celebrates your wins without a trace of envy. These modern Stoics might not write treatises, but their lives are the textbooks. They remind us that happiness isn't a distant summit. It's the ground beneath our feet if we'd only recognize it. Cato's defiance, Epictetus' limp, Stockdale's cell, they all point to the same truth. The things we think we need are often the very weights that keep us from flying. Epictetus once asked his students a question that cuts to the bone. Why envy what others have when you could envy their ability to be happy without it? That's the heart of Stoic sufficiency, not settling for less, but discovering that less was never less to begin with. Picture a lavish buffet. Most of us pile our plates sky high, sampling everything yet tasting nothing, only to leave uncomfortably full but oddly unsatisfied. The Stoic approach: select a few dishes deliberately, savor each bite, and rise from the table nourished rather than numb. It's not about denying yourself pleasure, it's about refusing to let excess dilute the very joy you sought. Modern life has turned this principle on its head. We confuse abundance with fulfillment, mistaking the volume of our possessions for the depth of our contentment. Social media amplifies this illusion, bombarding us with curated snapshots of other people's highlight reels, the dream vacations, the designer wardrobes, the picture-perfect homes. What we don't see are the sleepless nights behind those smiles, the credit card debt funding those lifestyles, the quiet desperation masked by filters. Epictetus saw this dynamic playing out in ancient Rome's chariot races, where spectators cheered wildly for their favored teams, staking their happiness on outcomes they couldn't control. His solution was radical simplicity. He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has. Here's the paradox: the more we chase more, the emptier we feel. Like drinking seawater to quench thirst, each acquisition only intensifies the craving. Neuroscience confirms this. The dopamine hit from a new purchase fades within hours, leaving us scanning for the next fix. Contrast that with the sustained warmth of watching a sunset with undivided attention, or the quiet pride of repairing something instead of replacing it. These aren't grand gestures, but they contain a grand truth. Sufficiency isn't a quantity, it's a quality of attention. So let's make this practical. Your challenge: identify one area where you'll practice enough this week. Maybe it's silencing the voice that insists you need another pair of shoes when your closet overflows. Or resisting the urge to check emails during dinner, mistaking responsiveness for importance. Start small, but start specific. When the impulse arises to acquire or consume beyond necessity, pause and ask Epictetus' question: will this bring lasting contentment or merely momentary distraction? The answer might surprise you. Buffet culture teaches us to fear missing out. Stoic wisdom teaches us to fear something far more insidious: missing what's already here. That cup of tea growing cold while you scroll, the conversation you half heard because your mind was drafting a reply. These are the real losses, the subtle drains on joy that no amount of accumulation can replenish. Enough isn't a limit, it's the threshold where want ends and wonder begins. Marcus Aurelius had a nightly ritual that might surprise you in its simplicity. As the candles burned low in his palace, he'd take out his journal not to plan tomorrow's battles or draft speeches, but to ask himself two quiet questions. What harm did I prevent today? And how did I grow in virtue? No grand achievements, no tally of conquered lands, just a sober accounting of character. This wasn't self-criticism. It was a gardener tending the soil of his soul, pulling weeds of pettiness and planting seeds of wisdom. Modern Stoics have adapted this practice into what's now called the evening review. Picture this: before bed, you mentally walk through your day like a film reel, pausing at 3 key moments: one where you acted with integrity, one where you fell short, and one where you witnessed someone else's virtue. The goal isn't to dwell on mistakes, but to spot patterns. Did you snap at the barista when your coffee order was wrong? That's data, not failure. Did you pause to listen when a colleague vented instead of interrupting with advice? That's progress worth noting. The Stoics believed these small audits prevented big regrets. Morning rituals hold equal weight. Seneca would begin each dawn by rehearsing the day's potential challenges, not as anxiety fuel, but as mental inoculation. The fool, with all his other faults, has this also: he is always getting ready to live, he warned. His version of a to-do list wasn't tasks but temperaments. Today I might face ingratitude. How will I respond? This isn't pessimism, it's emotional preheating, like stretching before a sprint. Modern equivalents might include writing down 3 intentions, not outcomes, before checking your phone. Today, I'll focus on what I control. I'll listen more than I speak. I'll find one thing to appreciate. The beauty of Stoic rituals lies in their flexibility. You don't need a leather-bound journal or an hour of meditation. Start with what the ancients called the Stoic pause: a single breath between stimulus and response. When your alarm rings, resist grabbing your phone. That 5 seconds of stillness is your first victory. Or try the obstacle preview while brushing your teeth. Name one challenge likely to arise today and mentally rehearse meeting it with patience. These micro-practices accumulate like compound interest for your character. Consider the dishwasher unloading test. Most of us rush through this chore, our minds already on the next task. But what if you treated each plate as a mindfulness bell? The clink of ceramics becomes a reminder. This too is life, not just the milestones, but the mundane. Epictetus would approve. He taught that philosophy isn't about lofty debates, but about how to wash dishes in a way that nourishes the spirit. Your challenge isn't to overhaul your routine overnight. Pick one Stoic ritual that resonates, maybe jotting 3 evening reflections in your phone's notes app, or dedicating your shower time to Seneca's obstacle rehearsal. The measure of success isn't perfection, but presence. As Marcus wrote on one of those candlelit nights, waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one, not tomorrow, not when life calms down, now, in the next ordinary moment you're given. We've traveled far together through these Stoic landscapes, from the jagged cliffs of control to the quiet valleys of presence. Along the way, we've mapped the coordinates of happiness, understanding what's truly ours to command and what isn't, mastering the alchemy of perception where obstacles become fuel, and building our lives on the bedrock of virtue where character outshines circumstance. But here's the revelation that changes everything. Happiness isn't something you find, earn, or stumble upon. It's something you practice, a skill honed through daily choices, like a blacksmith tempering steel. Think of the last time you learned to ride a bike or speak a new language. At first, every wobble felt like failure, every mispronounced word like defeat. But with repetition, what once required conscious effort became second nature. The Stoics argue that contentment works the same way. Each time you pause before reacting to criticism, each moment you savor the ordinary instead of chasing the extraordinary, you're strengthening neural pathways that ancient philosophers would recognize as wisdom. Modern neuroscience confirms this. The brain literally rewires itself through habitual thought patterns. Your mind is neither fixed nor fragile. It's malleable, waiting for you to sculpt it. Epictetus, who knew hardship intimately, left us a compass for this journey. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. That's the Stoic secret in one luminous sentence. Real abundance isn't measured in what fills your shelves, but in what no longer empties your peace. The friend who envies your promotion, their opinion belongs to them, not you. The traffic jam that hijacked your morning, an invitation to breathe rather than fume. Even loss, when met with clear eyes, becomes a teacher rather than a thief. Now it's your turn. Scroll down and share one insight from this video that resonated most, maybe the idea of negative visualization shifting your perspective, or the realization that your phone habits might be stealing more than time. Let's build a community where Stoic wisdom isn't just discussed but lived. And if you're hungry for more clarity, more resilience, more quiet joy in a loud world, consider joining us on this channel. Every new video is another step toward the unshakable freedom the Stoics promised wasn't just possible, but already within you. The water's fine.